Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
The crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
Hello, Steph.
Pat, hi, you're live on the air with Jason and Jim, the Liberty Brothers. How are you doing today?
Doing good. How you guys doing?
We're doing great. Thanks for joining us here on the show. Let me give you a quick introduction here. Pat Miletich is the founder of the Miletich Fighting Systems. He's also the U.S. Part of the Muay. He was the U.S. Muay Thai champion. His 3.5 years UFC welterweight champion. He's coached over 90 fighters to televised careers, 11 world champions. You are the co-founder of the Fire Horse Combatives. You have over 15 years experience training local, state, and federal law enforcement and military, including special forces. Current color analyst for Mark Cuban's Access TV fights, and you were a co-host on ESPN MMA Live, and former analysis at the CBS Showtime Sports. You're also a senior warden Freemason at the Hamilton Lodge. So thanks for joining us. And on top of all of that, you are just a legend amongst fighters, whether you're in the UFC or just an amateur fighter. I know that I've been following you for as long as I've been interested in MMA, and you've just done some incredible things. I've read about your camp, and I want to say it was a warrior's heart. But you've just been out there, part of this ever-evolving sport and really martial arts. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I always enjoy talking about the subjects you guys like to explore.
Well, that's kind of funny because a lot of times it seems that, the UFC fighters and fighters in general these days are getting a lot of media attention and always out there under the camera, but it's always fight-related, and it seems that there's not too many people out there really talking about the things that we're talking about. And I know from personal experience, we haven't met, but I'm an amateur fighter. I used to train with Ed Herman over at Team Trials out of Fort Collins and Ryan Schultz, and have competed on an amateur level. But, some of the most awake, intelligent people I've ever met are fighters.
Well, what we have left of our brains, we try to maximize and use at least.
Well, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just laughing. It was good.
Well, I was going to ask you, you seem to be a very awake guy. I know Jim's been talking with you more and more. We're coming on to the new year here. Can you tell us a little bit about what's on your radar? What are some of the things you're watching intently as we come into this new year, politically speaking?
What I'm watching is what's going to happen here as soon as this new Congress and Senate are sworn in, both houses of Congress, and see what they're going to do. There's talk of obviously the pipeline, a lot of things on immigration and a lot of other stuff, and they want to get those bills passed as fast as possible, get them to Obama, so that he can veto them. We'll see how that goes. But the Speaker of the House, Boehner, they're so entrenched. He's I think there's a lot of things going on in terms of intimidation of the young Republicans that are coming in. Luckily a lot of those guys are military background people who aren't afraid of a whole lot. But these politicians are very good at saying, if you go against the speaker and he loses, you're in trouble. A lot of backroom stuff going on, things like that. But also obviously closely watching, geopolitically what's going on all around the world, and a lot of what I would say missteps by this administration in our country, and what they're doing in terms of dealing with the Ukraine and Russia and that situation in the Middle East with ISIS, and a lot of other things that have been going on, and what's going to happen to our monetary system. I mean, everyone who's been paying attention for as long as I have knows that the American dollar is strong right now comparatively to other currencies around the world, but things are being manipulated, by the Fed and the IMF and a lot of other powerful, the banking structure, and it can't last forever. And so I'm watching that very closely also.
Pat, back in September 11th in 1991, George Bush Sr. used the term, it's time for a new world order. And that was one of the first times really that I think it was televised publicly, where I think he said it 3 times. It was exactly 10 years before the tragic events on 9/11. Do you see, now it sounds like, Pat, that used to be a conspiracy theorist and crazy if you started talking about things like the New World Order. But it seems to me that they really haven't exposed themselves to further their plan. And the cat's out of the bag in a lot of areas. How do you respond to that?
Well, even, if you go back to Eisenhower and Kennedy and those presidents, they were talking about that stuff. But they weren't talking about it in affectionate terms. They were telling people that it was rearing its ugly head and to pay attention and be prepared for it and try and stop it. And so, Bush Sr. and the rest of the presidents afterward, have been speaking in terms of, the New World Order in affectionate terms, and that it's going to do great things for humanity, which is really the opposite. And it's when you really dig into the Agenda 21s and the banking cabal and all these folks that are in control of all of this stuff, and Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission and the UN. It's such a scary, massive network of manipulation that it's almost inconceivable that we as citizens of the United States even have a chance to fight it unless everybody were to get educated, and that's going to be tough to do.
Well, let me ask you this, Pat. You come from very much a warrior tradition, and you're very much obviously willing to stand up and fight for what you believe in. It does seem as though that the vast majority of the public out there doesn't necessarily want to stand up and fight for what they believe in. They kind of want to just tune out and turn on the TV and drink another 6-pack. And we're seeing our constitutional rights just being decimated right in front of our eyes. And I think we're going to, whether that fighting is done on a physical level or more of a intellectual level with being involved in local politics and making a change that way, how important is it for us to foster that fighting spirit within our own communities to say, we're not going to just sit back and take this anymore. We're going to stand up and do what's right. Now, of course, I want to preface that this is not a call for violence whatsoever. This is a call for action, for people to get plugged in and involved and knowledgeable. But how important do you think it is for people to find that courage to plug in and take that first step?
It's the one thing I had a guy ask me one time, he said, how do you keep your sanity? Because, he's aware of a lot of the stuff that's going on that most of America's citizens are not. And he said, Pat, honestly, how do you keep your sanity when you learn the truth, when you really dig in and you truly investigate it and compare it to everything, all the facts, and you learn the truth about all this stuff that's really, truly going on? How do you keep your sanity? And I said, I don't know whether I'm sane, quite honestly, but I would say that for every citizen when they hear a story on the news about the Ukraine or about what's going on in the Middle East or about anything here domestically, to go online and read, to go buy books and read and study and learn the truth about what really is going on, so that at least you're prepared. We might not be able to stop it, but by gosh, we should be prepared to be able to deal with what happens because of these people's decisions, geopolitically and domestically. And that, for right now, is the best we can do, and protect ourselves and protect our families. But more so, I think that I just what's frightening to me is when you do get into a discussion with someone about it, and they look at you as if you live on Mars. When you know that person is just reading the newspaper and listening to the news and saying, yeah, you're an absolute lunatic. That's what's frightening to me, is that most of America doesn't know a lot of the facts that of things that are really going on.
Pat, I know you've done a lot of work with the police officers for years now, and we are friends with police officers here. We have friends in the CSPOA. We're a strong supporter of law enforcement. Let me get that out of the way first. However, even you with friends in law enforcement, Pat, I would think, but would be aware of the militarization of the police. And it seems that even small communities, and I want to say even a school system, got one of these big armored vehicles. Again, this is not a knock on police. We're friends with police here, and as I know you are, Pat. But I mean, you I know, and being an intelligent person, can see this ramping up of the black uniforms, weapons, big vehicles. What do you make of all that? I mean, what are we to make of that as American citizens?
Well, on the most benign circumstances, under those, when you look at the militarization of law enforcement, it was initially brought on and still is used as the excuses. The criminals are very, very highly, armed and very well trained, or very well armed with, semi-automatic rifles at very least many times. And so that was their reason for moving onto the AR-15 platforms for their guns a lot of times in their cars, and not just the normal shotgun. But the military vehicles and all these sorts of things being brought in, it's pretty scary. And I was at a training that I was doing in Las Vegas one time, and there were law enforcement military instructors from all around the country there. And one of the instructors there was actually the head of the SWAT team in Philadelphia, and this is many years ago. This has been at least 2 decades ago, where I believe it was possibly a Jamaican gang that had a big drug house going on, and the house was so well armored. They had steel shutters that they could close on all the windows. They had steel doors with a slot they could slide to look outside. And when the police vehicle tried to ram through the gate of the fence on the house, it got hung up on the fence, and some of the officers actually, I think, were shot and killed. And what the police officers did in response to that was to fly a helicopter over the top of the house and drop a satchel charge on the house, blow the house up, light it on fire, and burn down like 5 city blocks in Philadelphia. And that's, there was a big repercussion to that. But I actually was working and training with one of the guys he was the head guy of the SWAT team that was responsible for that insane thing that happened. You go back to, the Waco, Texas situation where a lot of the Branch Davidians were killed, and some of the other incidences. And this stuff is not necessarily a good thing. We see the Bundy Ranch situation where the law enforcement luckily backed down in that. And I think the only reason they did back down is that, well, they were outnumbered initially by an awful lot of Americans with guns who were standing up for their rights. The militarization of law enforcement is kind of scary. But at the same time, being a guy who's trained cops for 15 years, that's a scary job. And I think they just want to, and like I say, the most benign circumstances of them and reasons for them having this stuff is to just make sure that they're not outgunned by criminals on the streets who are capable of getting their hands on some pretty nasty weapons. But in worst case scenario, if federal government takes over law enforcement, like a lot of people are saying they're trying to, because of the way they're pushing the Michael Brown situation in Missouri, that they're trying to take over law enforcement and make it a federal entity, then we've got major problems, I think.
Well, we definitely are seeing a ratcheting up of rhetoric, and it seems like they're almost trying to divide the people involved in law enforcement and the average citizen. and they're obviously playing the race card and ramping up the militarization. And I don't know that we're actually seeing that much more actual police violence, or whether we're just hyper aware of it and they're putting it in our face because we have so much more access to immediate media now. But there's no doubt in my mind that they're definitely using this with an agenda to try to create kind of a tribalism, I guess. But they're definitely trying to keep us from uniting as a people. Do you see that happening?
Well, if you look at every issue domestically that we're dealing with currently, that's all they're doing is dividing and conquering. That's what they've been doing all along. This administration, it's very obvious what they're doing, and to, as long as they can keep the citizens fighting amongst themselves, they can do what they want, and that's exactly what they've been doing. So yeah, it's very clear to me, and I wish it were more clear to the average citizen of what's really going on, because if the truth be known, Americans, no matter what color, no matter what religion, no matter what race, we're all just trying to do our best to get along right now in terms of just taking care of our families. And, besides the few extremists on either side, Americans get along actually pretty dang well. And so that's something that's very frustrating to me to see what these people are doing deliberately to get their agendas pushed through, without people even noticing.
Well, Pat, let me ask you this. One more question, Jim. I'll give you the floor. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your foot there. What's the best way we can counteract this? I mean, what have you found? Obviously, you've got some great reach with your media exposure and being out there and being in the sports spotlight. What do you think are some of our best countermeasures to counteract what they're doing?
I think speaking the truth, no matter what the repercussions are, you have to speak the truth, and talk to people, start conversations. A lot of people get offended by some of the things that I put on Twitter, and I do it deliberately to offend people because it starts a conversation. I'll be critical at any time of something that I don't approve of. Number one, I'm not against the government, I'm for the citizens, but I have no problem voicing my opinion. And many people will be offended by that. I certainly have created enemies, and I really don't care about that. But I'm going to tell the truth about things that I see that are wrong, and that's what all Americans have to do. And, when I see someone, no matter what color they are, I try to say hi to people. I try to be friendly, and I try to shake people's hands and let people know that, I'm just a normal Joe trying to get by. And that's the way everybody needs to be right now. America needs leaders. We need to tell people to step up and become leaders. And, when I did a man's group, actually, a man's group at a church, a really cool church over in Illinois, and I went and gave a speech about what is a Christian man. Well, Christian man's right now, and any leader has got to step up, and you've got to tell the truth about the things that they see going on wrong in society, and not be shouted down, not allow people to shout them down, and that's something that true leaders can do. And telling the truth many times scares people, but and a lot of Americans right now they're trying to pay their bills, and many people will turn their head away from the truth. But if you say it enough times, eventually people will listen. And so that's something that we need to continue to do. And I urge all people out there who see themselves as having any kind of influence, especially just amongst your children, to teach your children what's really going on and prepare them. And hopefully that, if we can educate enough of our children that if we can't get it done, certainly they can.
Pat, let's switch gears for a second if we can. Before, when we've talked a few times, you're a Freemason, and you're proud of it. Right. And we talked before on the line in a previous conversation about some of the myths that you think are out there about Freemasons. Is that something you choose to talk about, or you care to talk about?
Well, I find a lot of it quite amusing, actually, and when I talk amongst, with other Freemasons from around the country and stuff, and just sitting around at somebody else's lodge or just meeting people in passing and stuff. If we get into conversations about, and people come up to me and ask me, and have even sent me emails, friends of mine who didn't know I was a Mason, and say, "Hey, man, you got to get out of that, man. That's satanic. That's bad stuff." And we laugh a lot about that stuff, and there's going to be misinformation deliberately put out about Freemasonry, and that's okay. I'm all right with that. I set people straight as much as I can. That we're not a satanic cult. It's when you go through the degrees of Masonry, you have to swear on the Bible. It is a society that is a secret society, but we have no secrets. And you've heard that, I'm sure, many times, but it's the truth. And if you ask 10 Freemasons what Freemasonry was, they would all probably tell you 10 different things, and they would all be correct. A particular Mason gets into Masonry for certain reasons. Some do it because of the degree work. Some do it for philanthropy, helping children, helping the elderly, the Shriners hospitals, things like that. Others do it because of the history that Freemasonry has had in shaping society, in changing the direction of society. When the royal family in the church in France was oppressing the people, and Freemasons helped stop that with the Revolution. The American Revolution was in large part had Freemasons throughout it, who were very pivotal in that, and that Freemasonry believes in the individual's rights and stopping oppression and tyranny. And that's the biggest reason that I joined Freemasonry, because of what I saw going on in society and how things were going south, and trying to find like-minded men like myself to communicate things with and talk about it.
Well, I know you would probably know this, Pat, because you're a Freemason. But of the founding fathers that signed the Declaration of Independence, I would imagine there was a decent amount of those fellows that were Freemasons. Is that accurate?
There were several, and then there's been, I believe, 17 U.S. presidents who were Freemasons, and you can look through the list of famous Freemasons throughout history, and the list is pretty impressive, to say the least. Thousands of names of people who were very influential in society, who were Freemasons.
Well, talk a little bit, if you can, Pat, about the UFC and MMA in general. And you certainly, as Jason pointed out, you are part of the foundation of that whole entire sport. Talk a little bit, even in your wildest dreams. I mean, you've been around for a long time. Did you see MMA? I mean, I know you were probably just like a mat rat, so to speak, and just doing it out of the love for it, probably not making a lot of money when you first started. Did you, even in your wildest dreams, see that know that the hundreds of millions of fans worldwide would come on board with MMA?
Well, I had faith that eventually it was going to explode. There were some very dark times, obviously. When the politicians and the athletic commissions all jumped on the bandwagon against it, we had a pretty bleak outlook on things. It's tough enough to train for a fight, but when you're training for a fight in a state that is working on banning the fight, the event, and stopping it, you don't even know if the event's going to happen, but yet you still have to keep training hard for it. It makes it a little tough, but we had this faith, and what gave me faith were moments where, in Nebraska one time when I was not fighting, but I was a special guest at a show, and a female news anchor was there, and she had to be there for the event and watch it and then commentate on it on her news channel. It was in Omaha, and she did not want to be there. She was completely against the sport. She had, things in her head that this was, dog fighting and everything else negative that had been spewed out of people's mouths about the sport. So she had a preconceived notion of what she was going to see. And it was my job to sit next to her and educate her on what was going on during the fight, as if I was the commentator. So I would tell her what the objectives were of what a guy was trying to attempt to do while he was maybe going for a submission or moving to a different position, and how the other guy had to defend it. And as the fight would progress, she would understand the sport better. And by the end of the night, she looked at me and she said, this is absolutely the coolest sport I've ever seen in my life. This is the best sport that I've ever seen. This is amazing. So I knew that once people got educated about the sport, that it would catch on. If I could get somebody in a couple hours' time who despised the sport to fall in love with it and consider it the greatest sport she'd ever seen, I knew that there was a chance for it. So, I'm glad that it has, continued to grow since.
I know that I was very intrigued when I first started studying. I came from a background where I had always done martial arts from the time I was a young adult, 12 years old, 10 years old, starting out with more traditional styles like Shotokan and Judo and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. But what really intrigued me about this whole new American MMA was that it was truly our own martial arts system that we were seeing evolve and grow right before our eyes. I mean, I kind of, with the judo, came up learning about Dr. Jigoro Kano and how he evolved judo from jiu-jitsu. And here with MMA, I could be a part of a style, a martial arts system that was going through its own evolutionary process here and be a part of that. Can you talk a little bit about the system, the martial arts itself, and just how it's uniquely American?
Yeah, well, I think that it's certainly got the American flavor because it's most popular and makes the most money here. But I came from a wrestling background my entire life and did some boxing as a youngster, and also did traditional karate and a 4th-degree black belt in Shorin-ryu, traditional Okinawan style karate. And I started going to tournaments a little bit when I was doing karate, and I would see the black belts walk around with their gi top pulled open and flexing their chest and walking like they had were the masters of the universe. And I thought, this is all a farce. We don't actually fight at these tournaments. We're playing tag. This stuff isn't real. I got disqualified for hitting a guy too hard and dropping him. And drawing blood, and I said, "This is an absolute joke." And when MMA took off, Ultimate Fighting originally, the traditional martial arts schools, were so against it that their instructors were walking around telling them that, well, we can't compete in that sort of sport because we teach one punch, one kill, one strike, one kill. And having come from a traditional martial arts background, I knew that was obviously not the case. You're not going to kill a trained fighter with one punch. It's just not going to happen unless you get extremely lucky and he hits his head on the concrete on the way down, whatever. But and as things progressed, they could not stop the grassroots movement of MMA. Nobody could stop it. The politicians couldn't stop it. The commissions couldn't stop it, and the traditional martial artists couldn't stop it. And the next thing you know, they're all taking their signs down and putting up karate and MMA training. And, everybody jumped on the bandwagon. But, the realization that, you have to learn what actually works in a real fight. And it's the greatest proving ground for combat that there is, minus weapons. And even when weapons are included in terms of edged weapons and guns and things like that, that close quarter combat, the things that work in a cage generally are going to work pretty well, whether you're wearing a uniform, whether you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt, or whether you're wearing board shorts and you're competing inside a cage. It really doesn't matter. Things change in terms of rules and how I have to use force and things like that if I'm a police officer or a military person or whatever. But the human body hasn't changed since we started to learn pancration and martial arts. And so, the things that we're discovering now in terms of how to fight better have already been discovered and lost long ago. So it's just this evolving, it's an amazing learning process, and you can do mixed martial arts until the day you die and never learn all of it. That's the cool thing.
Well, we're very much preppers here on the show. One of the shows that I used to have before we started the Liberty Brothers show was the Patriot Prepper Show, and not that I think we're going to see any huge cataclysmic end of the world type situation in our lifetime. I mean, we might see an economic crash, or I think it's more going to be incrementalism. But just I think in general, it's a good idea to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Right.
But as part of my prepping, training has always been an integral part of that, whether it's training Muay Thai or Muay Baran or weapons training with if you're going to carry concealed, know how to use it, know how to draw from concealment, know how to defend yourself, and that's part of my family's lifestyle as well. How important do you think it is to include training like that, hand-to-hand and weapons training and whatnot, just as part of this new prepping lifestyle? I don't know if you're a prepper at all yourself, but if I could get your comments on that, it'd be great.
Well, in terms of knowing how to take care of yourself, I'm actually surprised that people actually walk out their front door in many parts of this country and not know how to take care of themselves. And I had a guy, I was at a Rotary Club one time many years ago giving a speech about mixed martial arts. I was asked by a guy that I knew to come in and speak to his Rotary Club. And there's always, and no matter whether you're giving a seminar or training law enforcement, military, or martial artists, or giving a speech, there's always going to be at least that one person with their arms crossed, with their head tilted sideways, and their lips pierced, looking at you like you don't know what you're doing, and you're a waste of time to even listen to. And so the one gentleman that had that look on his face by the end of my speech raised his hand, and after I said, does anybody have any questions? He raised his hand and he said, "Why would anybody want to possibly learn this stuff? Why would I want to even?" And he asked it in a very snide tone of voice. And I said, humans are the only animal born on this planet with no self-defense instincts, whether it be in fleeing or fighting. We're the only animal that really has no clue how to defend ourselves unless we're taught. So when you walk out your front doors every day, statistically, you're very lucky that you haven't been at least robbed, mugged, or killed. And I said, when I walk out my front door, on the other hand, I'm pretty confident that 98% of the planet isn't going to be able to hurt me, and the ones that can aren't going to attack me most likely. So that's why people should learn this, so that they can protect not only themselves, but more importantly their wife and children, or themselves. And my kids are learning how to box, how to throw elbows and knees. I'm slowly working them up in knowledge and technique. My wife had done kickboxing for many, many years. So they're going to know how to take care of themselves. They're going to know how to shoot guns. They're going to know how to handle a knife. And so when my daughters leave for college, they'll be able to take care of themselves. And that's a gift that I think is very important to give to your child, just as well as making sure that they get a good education and have good instruction to go out into the real world and live their lives. But being able to protect that life is really a father's job and a mother's job, to make sure that those kids can take care of themselves. So it's very important.
Pat, we're coming right towards the end of the interview here, and before we have you give out any of your websites or any information that you want to give out, one question for you. You mentioned earlier, you touched earlier on the Fed, and we're of the mind here. I think I can pretty well speak for Jason that maybe not everything that ails us goes back to the Fed, but certainly there's a lot of the issues that we're facing here in society. You can link back to the private Federal Reserve and really the banksters. What's your comments on that?
Well, you're pretty much correct. I mean, the Federal Reserve, the world banks, their statement, it's not mine, their own words, was to give the monetary system, stabilization and keep it stable. And they've failed miserably in that. And they're failing now on it. It was intended to, when the world banks talk about, having a peaceful world, well, world banks are the ones that have funded, the wars. And so that's absolutely not true. So everything that they talk about being the goals and objectives of the Federal Reserve and the world banks is completely false. And it really does come back to pretty much everything that ails us is really the responsibility of and caused by the banksters, as you put it. These folks are, they do not have loyalty to nations. I'm an American. I bleed red, white, and blue, and that's where my loyalty lies. But these folks have none of that. It is to the bank and to the monetary system and to making sure that they can keep control of it. And it's a very scary thing when people first learn to look at their face, when they understand how money is created now, and then it's based on nothing of value. They're in shock. So yeah, we've got to get back to sound money principles. As you've heard many, many guys who are against the Federal Reserve say, we need some way of stabilizing it. And the interesting thing, I studied tax revolts quite a bit, and tax revolts many times ended in either a king losing his head or citizens being beheaded or just a lot of chaos. And tax revolts now, people are starting to realize at least that comes down to digital currencies that are created by citizens. And the more that people can educate themselves and use those digital currencies like Bitcoin and Fluttercoin and other things like that, and strengthen those digital currencies, the less power these world bankers will have over us in our country. And so, anything that citizens can do to educate themselves on it is very important. So I would suggest people start reading about that.
That'd be a great topic to have you on some other time about with the whole digital cryptocurrency stuff. Please, we're coming up to the end of the hour. We're going to be going to a break here soon. Before then, we want to let people know how they can get more information on you, any upcoming projects you might have, and just give out whatever information you might want to give.
Yeah, people can, anybody that's involved in any law enforcement or military training, obviously, like you said, I've been doing it for over a decade and a half, and my partner Don Roberts and I, we formed Fire Horse Combatives quite a while back, and we train pretty much anyone, whether it's local, state, federal law enforcement, military, special forces, corporate officers who have to travel globally, protection details, anybody out there. We've certainly worked with all of them, and we love what we do, so people can go to firehorsecombatives.com and look us up and check us out and hopefully bring us out for a training. And there's ways of law enforcement folks getting free trainings for their departments. And then also at Pat Miletich on Twitter and TSU, which is a great site now. They pay you for social media. tsu.co/Pat_Miletich. And people can go there and get signed up and get started on social media where you actually get paid to post things.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the show, Pat. Folks, we'll be back at the other end of the hour. We'll talk with you then.
Thanks, Pat.
You are listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, because freedom isn't free.